So the last stage was all about preserving areas that you either light areas or very brightly coloured areas that you don't want to lose by the end when you've put in all your layers. You want to preserve certain little specks of really bright colour. So I've just, filled in some of the facades of the houses that are a bit lighter because the light's still coming across, and some of the little details like the buoys and the life-saving ring and chimney tops. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to fill in the background area. Now that I've got some of these chimney tops defined, I'm going to use some very light diluted colours to define what's in the background. So we've got the Clifton houses, some trees, the bridge, and then in the background there's going to be the hill of the Ashton Court estate, and I want it to look very hazy. So I'm going to use very light tones, not really much darker than the sky, some blues, a colour I like to use called neutral tint, possibly a bit of ochre in the hill area, very diluted, lots of water to make it really hazy and kind of background colours. I have to work quite quickly so that the paint doesn't dry too much, because I really want to have some nice bleeding from one colour into another. So just adding a bit more water. Okay, so I've got all of my light areas defined, so it's starting to come together, the general colour palette. So the next phase is a bit more of a longer phase. I'm just going to use blocks of colour to fill in some of the main areas of mid-tone. So I'm not going to work with any dark colours yet, this is saved for right at the end. So I'm going to use some blues, purples, reds, browns. So I'm going to paint the main buildings and boats, and also the main areas of reflections in the water. I'm also going to start to define where the darker objects will be, but perhaps using a slightly lighter colour than what the final colour will be. Okay, so I moved on quite a bit since the last stage. I would have liked to have shown you the whole thing, but that would have made for quite a long video. So basically what I was doing in the last stage was filling in the mid-tones, so always working from light to dark. Admittedly, I've jumped the gun a little bit a couple of these colours I would describe as slightly darker than mid-tone, but that's okay because these colours are not going to have anything light laid next to them. So the main problem, you know, you always have to work from light to dark because to preserve the luminosity, and also because it's very tricky to lay a light colour next to a dark colour because you will end up getting some ugly sort of smearing. So now I'm just going to carry on. I'm going to define some of the slightly darker and deeper areas of colour, so starting to bring in some of these ultramarines, cobalt, deeper reds and browns, indigo, turquoise. So yeah, just working with slightly deeper colours now. Another thing to say is I often work wet and next to dry, so working in blocks of colour. So for that reason I had to wait. Sometimes I had to wait during the last phase for some areas to dry before I could lay the colour next to them. so I've got some nice bold colours now. I've used some sort of turquoises, indigo. I've also filled in this wall, which is almost the darkest object in the foreground, using some sort of darker reds and browns. I actually inserted a little bit of bright colour here. It's this kind of colour, just for a bit of fun and a bit of luminosity in that dark area. What I'm going to do now is work a little bit more into the water and show you a bit more about how I do that. So for the water, I really value my Chinese brush because I can use the tip of the brush and the middle of the brush to create all different kinds of marks, and it's really nice because it holds enough water so that I can really work with the fluidity of the water to create the fluidity of the water. So I'm just going to use some slightly deeper colours to reflect some of these darker areas towards the tops of the buildings. Always try and look at where the real life details are and try and put the reflections in the corresponding place below.